Hello, hello, and welcome to our weekly book club episode of Homeschool Moms Unfiltered. I'm your host, Amanda, and my bookworm co-host here is...
Hello, I'm Megan.
Hey. All right, so a podcast book club, huh? Yep, you did hear that correctly. We drop a new book club episode every week on Thursdays. We've got dozens and dozens and dozens of them you can go listen to on all different types of books. You can tune in and listen to us digest the book. You don't even have to read the books if you don't want to. But we will say, we think you're probably going to want this trilogy of books that we're reading right now, because not only are they an easy read, they're a great homeschool resource. But more on that to come.
Yeah. So if you're new here, welcome. We are a secular and progressive podcast and community. If you are a secular homeschooler who is happy to celebrate Pride without acting like an entitled ass and asking, when is straight Pride Month? Then you're going to love it here. It can be hard to find your people in the homeschool community, especially if you live in a place that leans quite conservative. But virtual friends are real friends, so welcome to our community.
Yes, 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 yes. I'm actually looking forward to. We're going to try to hit up some Pride stuff this weekend, so that should be good.
Ooh, nice.
All right, now we are kicking off the third book of this trilogy of books. So we promise they're a secular pick. Before we say anything else, we promise it's secular. In fact, they pretty firmly sit in the atheism camp, but they're a great resource for teaching your kids from a secular worldview perspective about world religions, gods, and belief systems.
Yeah, exactly. So the book series is written by David McAfee and Chuck Harrison. We started with the belief book that went through why people have belief systems and things like that. Then we did 2 weeks on the Book of Gods, which was just kind of like dipping our toe into the water of gods because there's 1,000,001 of them. But, how do gods come to be and why do people believe in them? And now we're moving on to the final book in the series, which is called the Book of Religions. The books are written for ages 8 to 12-ish, and our reading level is higher than that. Shocking. So we've primarily been reading them to evaluate if they're a resource that we would recommend to homeschoolers and to kind of say, like, yeah, this would be a great tool for you to use when your kids ask questions like, who is God and where did he come from or where did he live? So yeah, absolutely. So far, we are quite impressed with this trilogy. We would totally recommend this. These would be great books to have on your shelf. They're tiny little books. They're easy to read. They're super kid friendly. The drawings in them are great. The illustrations are great. Love it. I will say before we start off, I do not live in the US and I read on an e-reader because I can't find books in English otherwise. And for whatever reason, I couldn't get this book to download on my Kindle. It just kept saying, this book is not formatted for this device. I'm like, how? I read the other two on the Kindle. How is this one not? So I don't know. So I anticipate being really clunky and awkward this week and probably next week as well, because I had to read on my phone in the Kindle app. So I couldn't highlight like I normally do and type my little notes in like I normally do and stuff. So, but I'm here for it. Let's do it. I'll just be staring at my phone the whole time. Don't mind me. I'm not being rude. I'm not doom scrolling. I swear. I'm here for it.
That's all I use is the Kindle app when I'm on my phone. I don't have a Kindle device myself. Though my kiddo does have a kid's version, but yeah. All right. Well,
Yeah.
So this one, it starts out, the first thing is a super small chapter. It's called Welcome to the Book of Religion. And I had just pulled out a quick little thing. It said on page 2, so are you ready to know just what religion is and how it's a part of your life, even if you don't know it? And I liked the way that that was set up because I think so often we forget, especially if we have removed ourselves from religion in general, but maybe even if you're ensconced in religion, but you've decided that you want to make sure you teach your kids a more secular worldview of all religions and you want them to really be thoughtful about it. I think we forget how much religion is so incredibly pervasive in culture, like just in all culture, in music and movies and sayings and like just everywhere, right? Like you can hear reference to the golden rule and have absolutely no idea what that is. Yeah. So I just thought that was a good point and kind of one of those, like an easy deep dive. For me, this book, more than any of the others we've read in this trilogy, had the most things that I was like, oh, that would be a good deep dive. Like you mentioned before, the books are good. They're written for ages like 8 to 12. I totally think with the parent helping, you could start this much younger than that. But I
100%.
also think that if you are interested in having some really deep, challenging conversations with your tweens and teenagers, you could 100% use this book for that as well as like a so you kind of have the same base language and then kind of dive off into different areas. And this book was especially solid in that regard for me.
I could see that. I mean, you could build an entire high school elective out of it by adding all those deep dives and stuff in. That's kind of how I use Who Was books. Like, I feel like Who Was books are great even for older kids because those little blurb pages that they put in them where it's like fun facts and tangential subjects and stuff like that, like those are great deep dives. So this would kind of be the same. I like it.
I could see that.
Yeah.
Okay, so then the next chapter is titled What's Religion? So we're just going to, dive right on in there. No dipping your toe in here. But on page 4, I pulled out this quote. It says, at least once in your life, someone you know and trust has probably taken you to a building that was filled with people. And you watched as the people sat and listened to one person who may or may not be dressed funny, as they talked about things that sounded magical, things beyond what you can see, touch, hear, and feel. You might have noticed how the people listening did whatever the person speaking told them to do. This could be singing or even standing up and then sitting down again. You probably had no idea what was going on. And for me, I thought this was interesting because clearly, right, I understand that he's talking about going to a place of worship, whether it's a church or a synagogue or whatever. But I wondered how true it was. Like, how many of the people reading this book, how many people in general are taken to something like this and have no idea what's going on? For me, and for me, it was especially like, I wonder how true that is because my kiddo's 11 and a half, and we only just recently attended a Catholic funeral mass, a Catholic funeral with mass. I'm not Catholic. I don't really know the correct terminology there, but it was a long service and there was definitely a lot of up and down and repeat after me business. But we had talked about it, right? And I was like, when we sat in the back because all of like the good Catholics were at the front and then all of the people that were there because we knew them from work were in like the back couple pews. And so I was like narrating the whole thing and explaining like, and they're doing this and this is what that means and this is why they're doing that. And like, watch, they're about to do something really interesting, like these like books, there's like the hymnal and the Bible or whatever it is that they had there that you can like look at. And he's like, oh, this is, like his first chance to really like just thumb through them because it was the first time we had been at something like that. So yeah, it made me wonder like how many 8 to 12-year-olds have really been taken to a house of worship of some type. And yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think it's mostly weddings and funerals. So if they're not invited to those things or included in those things, they might not see as much of that. But I think that's probably like the majority of that. I've been rewatching Downton Abbey because it's on Netflix here and I've had it on in the background while I've been working and whatever. I've seen it a bunch of times, so I don't really have to pay attention to it. But there's a scandalous thing where one of the like prim and proper ladies marries one of the house staff and he's Catholic and she's English Protestant and it's a whole thing. And so they end up having to go to a Catholic service for the baby's christening when the baby's born. And the father is like so prim and proper and he's like, it's all this like bobbing up and down. I felt like I was at a gymnastics mat. Yes, it would feel that way if you're not from that world. I liked it. So yeah, I just made a note on page 6, and this section is no different. They continue on with a whole bunch of definitions here with it, and it kicks off with religion. There's more throughout. So I just kind of made a note of them where I came across them. I haven't had any really meaty notes yet.
Okay, so yeah, at the bottom of page 6 and then continuing on to page 7 for me, I pulled out where he says, so religion just means there are people out there who believe in gods and try to follow their rules, right? Well, not quite. It's a little more complicated than that. Mostly because when you have a religion that you follow, it's usually not just about belief in a god. Our definition says the belief in and worship of, and we need to find out about worship if we want to really understand what a religion truly is. And I thought that was a good point, right? Because again, this book is all about teasing out the different things. The whole series is teasing out these like, well, there is this, but there's actually more to it. And that explains all of these other pieces. And so, yeah, I just really liked the way that it's like, well, it's not just about believing, it's also about the worship. And so now we're going to go into the next chapter is called The Why of Worship.
Yep. So it kicks off with the definition of worship on page 8. Then we have the definition of interact on page 10, because they're getting into the way people interact with their gods. And that is part of this worship principle, right? Like the way that they're doing this. But I thought it was really interesting because he starts to get into this idea that some people don't interact with people outside of their faith because their holy book tells them not to. And I was kind of like, like, is that really a thing? We know that people don't interact with people outside of their faith sometimes, right? That's a very real thing. I mean, I have lived in places and homeschooled in places that are in the deep South. And I mean, I have lived in places with Christian only soccer teams and Christian only theater groups and Christian only every other extracurricular activity that you could ever possibly freaking imagine. And I'm like, when do you ever see that from anyone else? Could you imagine seeing like Muslims only allowed on this soccer team? Like, it's like not, I mean, could you imagine the uproar? Fox News would cover it for a week straight.
So horrible.
Yeah. I mean, like, we're recording this during the time of the mayoral elections in New York City. I mean, like the outcry against Mamdani alone would tell you what a Muslim only soccer team would cause in this country, right? But it's like you're telling me that your kid cannot kick a soccer ball to another kid unless they're saved. Like, that's not a thing. You have to have the promise of eternal friendship. You can't just kick a soccer ball to somebody casually, you know? I mean, we've been out of the United States now for over 8 months, basically full time. I mean, we've popped in for like a week here or a week there if we, do something or whatever, but there's no Jesus bumper stickers on cars. There's nothing on clothes like Saved by the King. Like, you don't have any of this stuff in other, like, you've traveled all over the world. This is not a thing. The way it is, this oversaturation that we have here is not a thing. And so I started thinking about it and I was like, what do the holy books actually say?
So I am going to say that I agree with you. It is far, far more prevalent in the United States. That said, I have met some very devout people outside of the United States who still believe in this idea that like they can only really interact with you if it is to try to convert you. Right. So that, and I'm not sure. I lived in the South for a hot minute. And I did also experience that thing of like, well, you can only be a part of this if you've been saved. Have you been saved? And at the time, I was religious. I was a Christian and I had been going to church, but I went to a type of church that didn't believe in like being saved. Like you were like a believer or you like weren't a believer, but you didn't have to be saved. And so I was always like really off put, like, this is so bizarre.
You weren't the right brand of Christian.
That's exactly what was happening.
Yeah.
But it's that thing, like, I do think that there are people who are very devout in their beliefs and who believe much. I also believe that Christians really love to cherry pick what they're going to believe in. But when they are cherry picking their beliefs, they cherry pick this idea that you can only interact with non-believers if you are actively attempting to save them, if you are actively attempting to convert them. But there are a lot of people who just don't interact with non-believers and they're not actively attempting to convert or save anyone, and definitely not for good reason. They've just like drawn this bizarre line in the sand.
They're just being exclusionary. Yeah, I mean, I looked it up. I was like, I'm curious. I mean, I'm more familiar with Christianity and Judaism because I was raised in the United States. And so those are kind of the two that I've become familiar with, right? But you've got in Christianity, right? Do not be unequally yoked with unbelievers is in the Bible, but it's in context of marriage, not a soccer ball. It's not about passing to like the center forward on your soccer team. I mean, it's written by Paul, and Paul engaged with people who were not Christians. So that is not the meaning of it. You've got bad company corrupts good character. But again, written by Paul, who spent time with, mind you, also to evangelize to non-Christians, right? In Judaism, you don't have this, right? You have, you shall not mistreat or oppress a stranger, for you were strangers in the land of Egypt. The stranger who resides with you shall be to you as one of your citizens. You shall love him as yourself. Again, intermarriage, but we're talking an improv troupe. We're talking soccer season. I'm not talking about marriage at this point in time, right? Islam, same thing. There was one, I thought this was really interesting because I'm not as familiar with the Quran. So first off, it says, Allah does not forbid you from those who do not fight you because of religion and do not expel you from your homes, from being righteous toward them and acting justly toward them. Indeed, Allah loves those who act justly. And then there's a thing down below that says, and do not argue with the people of the book except in a way that is best. And of course, it's referring to mainly Judaism is usually the people of the book, but there's some Christianity mixed in there too. So you have that, right? Even in Hinduism, truth is one. The wise call it by many names, which I thought was so beautifully written, meaning the truth is one, but there are many paths to the truth. Like, we're not the only ones who are like, we've trademarked truth, right?
Yeah.
And so I thought, like, it's kind of this bastardization, as so often happens, of what's actually in the book.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah. Well, a little further down on that same page, he's talking about how people interact. So we're still on this theme of interact. And the quote said, when we say people interact with their phones, we're saying they touch it and look at it. They laugh and cry at it. It's an object that seems to be really, really important to them. And he's drawing this parallel about, like, well, do people worship their phones? Do they put their phone above all else the same way you do with gods and religion? And it just made me really think, like, again, another one of these examples that's great for kids to help them really put some things into perspective. And as an outsider, if you saw the way that people interact with their phones, it's so true. If someone didn't have a smartphone, if they had no idea what all happened with a smartphone, like, I was thinking for me personally this week myself, I have cried more than I normally do while looking at my phone. I have a friend whose daughter has been sedated and in critical condition for like a week and a half. And so they're posting daily updates of what the doctors are doing to try to save her and all of these kinds of things. And of course, every update has made me cry. Like, there's no way that you read that kind of thing, especially about someone you know and you're close to, and you don't shed a tear. And if you don't, I'm not sure I want to be friends with you. I'm just going to put that out there. But then the flip side is I've been overwhelmed, and there's a lot of bad stuff happening in the world and personally with friends, and actually with my immediate family. There's some shit going down right now. And so in my free time, I've been reading an ebook that 100% makes me laugh out loud because I need that. And so, like, half the time I'm crying over my phone and half the time I'm like laughing hysterically. If someone had no idea what on your phone did, they would be like, wow.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so true. All right. Then we have an activity that kicks off that carries throughout. So in the other two books, we've had activities where kids could create their own god or, things like that. This one is an activity that carries through this entire section of reading where they're creating their own religion, one building block at a time. So it kind of kicks off on 11, but then continues throughout this section of reading. And it's a really well thought out activity.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And so for me, with this whole activity, but especially the beginnings of it on pages 11 and 12, you're like, it's culminating with the comment, so maybe you love the idea of having ice cream for breakfast. Why not invent a religion all about that? And just the way that it comes together, and he wraps it up with that, it really had me thinking about how a lot of religions start out as something good, right? Like, the core idea is something good or positive. In this case, yes, you're talking about, like, I want to be able to have ice cream for breakfast every day. And so I'm going to create a religion that believes in that and encourages it. And there's not necessarily anything wrong with allowing or even encouraging someone to eat ice cream for breakfast. Honestly, I have to say, I'm not 100% sure why this author is so hung up on that, because from my perspective, I'm like, ice cream is full of dairy and protein. And yeah, it's got a lot of sugar in it, but the vast majority of kids' breakfast cereals have the same amount of sugar,
Also,
So like what's the difference between a bowl of kids' breakfast cereal and a bowl of ice cream for breakfast every morning? Like I wouldn't care. But for me, I don't eat much sweets just in general. And it's been quite prevalent here because my family, they will often have ice cream a lot of evenings. And I I probably join in maybe a quarter of the time because I'd much rather pop a bag of popcorn and have that for my evening snack than ice cream. So this kind of religion, right? Well, I have no problem with it. Now I'm a bad person because I can't eat ice cream every day. And I thought it was just a really interesting way for kids to be able to think about this because I'm sure that most kids read this and are like, oh, this is a great idea. And they didn't think about it. But if they have an adult who's reading along with them and says, well, I don't have a problem with you having ice cream, but I don't want ice cream that often, like really just helps drive home this idea that something that was supposed to start out good evolves into something not so good despite the initial motivations of the person creating it. And I think that that
mhm.
applies to the vast, vast majority of religious systems and beliefs out there.
Now there's like a special section of purgatory for lactose intolerant people. And who saw that coming?
Oh, man. All right. So the next chapter is called The How of Worship. So on page 14, I pulled out this quote. It says, we now know that if we are going to create a religion of our own, we must have a God or idea that we can worship. We also know that worship is showing a God or idea more love than anything else in the whole wide world. For me, I was like, well, that's a good summary. And I never would have thought of it that way. But it also drives home why or how it works that in the more conservative religions that go down this kind of God above all else, why so
Mhm.
often those parents or family members are the ones that disown their kids. And I'd always wondered how they could do that, like where you got to that point. But I guess it's this idea that you have to love your religion or your God who gave you your rules and beliefs more than anything else, including your kids. It's still hard for me to understand it on a personal level, but it helped me understand where those folks are coming from. And again, I think a great point of like really good discussion with your kiddo, no matter the age, right?
Yeah, that's such a good point. If you've been indoctrinated into that since the time that you were singing Jesus Loves
Mhm.
Me in a circle at the age of 2.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's so true. Hmm. Oh, yeah. All right. All right. Then on the next 3 pages from 14 to 17, we look at some religions from around the world, just a handful. This is kind of the theme of these books. It's never all the gods. It's never all the religions. It's just kind of a smattering. In this one, he talks about Muslims. He talks about Christians. He talks about Buddhism. I like the fact that he broke Christianity down to mainstream Christianity and then the people with the deadly snakes. There was a video the other day outside the White House of people speaking in tongues in like a prayer circle. Did you see it before they went into the White House? And I was
I did
like,
not see it,
so they're
but I saw a meme that was like the people who speak in tongues have a real problem with people speaking Spanish. Yeah.
so true. Yeah. So yeah, right. I was like, unfortunately, they're becoming more
Mhm.
mainstream. But yeah, like I like the fact that he broke it down a little bit too. So we've got kind of that outlined over the next couple of pages.
Yeah. For me, I pulled out on page 16. I love the way he paralleled how Muslims pray facing their holy city 5 times a day. And like Christians think that this is like over the top and a sign of weird devotion. Like a lot of Christians have this a real issue with the way Muslims pray. But then he points out that Christians pray just as many times a day while looking at or doing other things, which we talked before in the previous book about how like why does grandma talk to her food, and it was basically like she prays to her food even though she's not actually praying to her food, but it sure looks like that to everyone else. And I'm like it's a really good point. What's the difference and why do you get to judge one is better than the other?
Yeah, so
And then on
true.
page 17, he talks about dunking babies in water, and that just made you chuckle, right? Like when you put it that way, which is the way if you don't understand what's happening and why, like it just sounds so preposterous, right? Like,
They're waterboarding a child in the name of God.
right. Okay.
Huh.
So then he kind of wrapped up that little chunk of comparing and helping draw some parallels. And on page 18, he defines devotion, and he defines it as love or loyalty for a person, activity, or cause. And I thought that that was a good way to define it, because then he rolls into this idea. He says, quote, but be careful, because for some, the way you worship can be habit forming. And I was just like, oh man, it's so true. And he goes on, he's encouraging you to think about what habits you have, whether, like, do you always tie your shoes before you leave the house, or do you brush your teeth every day, and these kinds of things. What a great rabbit hole for like good and bad habits, and how, especially with religion, but with all kinds of things, and what's the difference and who gets to decide and where's that line drawn and does it vary by culture? And just, I was like, oh, I thought that this book was like full of amazing rabbit holes and deep conversations and critical thinking and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, because next he gets into rituals. And I found that section really fascinating, the way it can become addictive and the way it can become kind of a source of guilt or a source of angst, as opposed to a source of joy and a source of inspiration, or kind of instead of filling your cup, it's emptying your cup. I thought it was really, really interesting the way he gets into that next. So
Yeah, the next ones are good.
I liked it. Yeah. So we'll get into that momentarily. But beforehand, we just want to give you a heads up that book club in its current form, which is new episode releasing every Thursday, is shifting over to Patreon at the end of the summer. And it is currently 2025. So if you're listening to this way in the future, come join us. Instead of us sitting here and yapping about the book, we will be doing that now on Zoom with our community members. It'll be more interactive, more engaging, more community-based, more fun, dare I say. Although I do have fun, not to insult. It's not like Amanda's not good company. It's just, we're just expanding the community circle. So we are making that transition at the end of the summer. You can join as an all access member, and you'll have access to unit studies and live meetings and book club and everything else. We've also added a new book club tier that you're welcome to join now, but there's no book club meetings until the fall. But you are welcome to join. You'll get 90% off your first month using the code bookworm. So you're welcome to come hang out with us over there. Book club will be twice a month. You still don't have to read the book if you don't want to. You're still welcome to like pop some popcorn, bring a margarita, like show up in your pajamas. No one cares. Whatever works for you works for us. We're a very low key and kind and supportive community. So come on over and hang out with us. Our first book will be Salman Khan's book about AI. I don't remember the title off the top of my head because I didn't write it down, but it was something like the way AI is revolutionizing education and why that's a good thing or something. Yeah. And we're not telling you it's a good thing. He is. We're going to debate in book club whether or not it's a good thing. So we'll keep you posted, You're welcome to bring your own thoughts and feelings.
Yep. I also love that you mentioned having a margarita, because I'm visiting my parents right now. I do that in the summer, and we just so happen to record on Thursdays, and where my folks live, Thursday night is the night to go. They have $5 margaritas and like really cheap things. So like every Thursday night, as soon as we wrap recording, I go out for margaritas and chips and salsa with my parents. So like I'm super, it's definitely like
you're getting your appetite ready to go. You're like, I'm good. Chips, salsa, margarita, stat. We have about a half an hour to go and you're free to go.
And then I'm going to drown myself in salsa because I love chips and salsa.
I love it. Yeah. So come on over. Now is the perfect time to come join us over there, because we are taking a poll right now as far as when book club should be held, what day of the week, what time of day. And we're going to try to go with the majority and appease as many people as we possibly can with the day and time. So there's a poll running over there right now. When you join, we'll always send you like a happy welcome message and the link to the poll. So come on over and join us. There'll be a link in the show notes. There's a coupon code in the show notes. Yeah. And we would love to welcome you over there for a little change in book club atmosphere. It's going to be good.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. All right. So next section is called Ritual, Ritual, Ritual. And I have the first note here, but I have to log back into my phone. I have to put my passcode in every time I try to say something. Oh my goodness. Darn Kindle technology. Okay. So, okay, he's got a short story that he starts off here, which I thought was really, really good. It says, a long, long time ago, there was a man who thought the sun was a god. He worshipped his god by dancing in its warm rays every single day. One day, the man did not dance, and the next morning when he woke up, the sun was hidden behind thick, dark clouds. He became so frightened that he danced and danced until the sun came back. After this, the man never missed another day of sun dancing for the rest of his life. His dance became a ritual, and here's what that means. And I thought that was just like such an awesome opening story for the way that this goes. Then he goes into the definition of a ritual, and then they weave that into consequences. So something that happens because of something else, meaning that if you are not praying the right way, if you're not praying often enough, if you're not praying, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, whatever you turn that into, there will be a consequence. And it talks about the fact that this man was no longer dancing out of joy, but out of fear because of this consequence that might happen. And I just thought that like the whole way he carried that through 3 or 4 pages was just beautiful, I thought.
Yeah. Well, and you have the note, right? That like along with the consequences, it goes back to this idea of the conditional, unconditional love of God's, right? Like make it make sense. But again, like a great thing to talk about and weave through with your kiddos if you're using this book. And then I had that same, I pulled out the quote on page 24 about how the dance is no longer out of joy. He says, the quote, the man believed that if he didn't dance, the food planted in the ground would not grow, or that the sun would go away completely and leave the world in darkness. The fear of these things happening made it so that the man had to dance. The dance was no longer filled with the love and joy it used to be. It became an act of worship out of fear, and it was repeated over and over again. The fun and love were replaced with fear and endless rules, rules about where he could put his feet and how he can move his body, rules about what time of day he could dance and where he could boogie, rules for the clothing he had to wear and what he could eat and drink before the dance. There were so many rules that it started to control the man's life.
Yeah. Yeah. And I kind of made a note of that. And it was interesting because, you know, we talk about the rules and things like that, but there's been so much in the news lately about the 10 commandments because of all of this push to put the 10 commandments back in school and all this kind of stuff. But in Judaism, there are 613 commandments, right? The 2 tablets with the 10 commandments are not a thing, right? I mean, there are rules for everything. I mean, as far as like the order in which you do things, the sequence, the way you clean things, the way you prepare food. I mean, every hand washing, there's a whole process for hand washing. There are commandments for everything. And I mean, in my mind, it's a little bit different because Jews are not trying to recruit anyone. So we talked about like with Christianity, there's this push to bring new people in. And so it's like, if you want to live your life that way and follow 613 rules and memorize them and, you know, consult your books before you cut a strawberry, that's okay. You do you, right? I mean, like, that's completely fine. You're not trying to get me to do it. So I'm okay. I'm okay with that. But talk about rules, right? You know, I mean, it is a lot of rules. So yeah.
Yeah. I did not know that there were that many commandments in Judaism, but I'm
613.
a bad American apparently, because I don't know all the 10 commandments either. I probably did at some point, but if I can't keep track of 10, I don't know 613, that's for sure. Okay, so the next chapter is called Rules from Above and Below. And so my first quote was on page 28. It says, you see, to worship the god of ice cream the right way, you have to consume ice cream for breakfast every day with double servings on Saturdays. It's written down, so it must be true, right? Why would the god of ice cream lie to us? Doesn't he love us as much as we love him? Well, that's up to whoever is writing the thoughts and feelings of the god of ice cream. And I was like, oh, yeah, now we're getting into some good stuff. Now we're getting into the stuff that's like, well, is it, but such a huge concept. And
told in such a user-friendly
Mhm.
way, right? Like in such a way that's so easy for kids to understand.
Yeah, because I mean,
So
you have this idea. Again, the kids are making up their own God with a religion and beliefs and all of these things throughout this. That's the activity that they're working on throughout this book. But at the same time, they're seeing a model of it with this God of ice cream idea. And so now we have the rule from the God of ice cream. But also, we know that the God of ice cream didn't actually reach his hand down and write this rule. So, like, well, who wrote it? Right. And like, yeah, I just like it's done so well.
I love it. I thought it was fun on that same page. There's a thing there about don't like the idea of doing homework, invent a God that says you don't have to do homework. And it's written down. And now it's a violation of your religious freedoms to try to make you do homework. And I was just like, oh my gosh, that is genius. And so there was a thing. Did you ever watch that show, Orange is the New Black, that was on Netflix?
Oh, I mean, you know me. You know, I watched it for a hot minute and then something happened and I was like, I'm not finishing this.
There was it was like a decent ways in. There was a whole thing where so it's set in a prison for anybody who doesn't know, and it's a fascinating TV show. But there was a thing where they realized one person realized that if they said they were Jewish and that they needed kosher food, they would get better quality food than what was available to the general public in the prison. And then next thing you know, there were it was a female prison. So all these women were like, yes, I too am a Jew. And like, oh, and they're all walking around eating kosher food because it was a better quality of food than what was available to the regular. And I was like, oh, yeah, this is hilarious. This is fantastic. Which normally, like, you fly a lot. Have you ever seen somebody get a kosher meal on a plane? Like, it's not the better option on a plane or in some. There's amazing kosher food options, but on a plane, it's not that thing because it has to be sealed, double sealed, and all this kind of stuff to prevent being touched or cross contaminated. So it's usually like not the most amazing option. And so the fact that in prison, the kosher meal was the good one was like, no, not so much. So I thought that was interesting. Then there was a thing here. You talked about cherry picking before. There's a verse here from Leviticus that says, do not cut the hair at the sides of your head or clip off the edges of your beard. Which is why when you can spot religious Jewish men from a mile away. They have the payos on the sides of their sideburns, right? Where their sideburns come down really, really low and they have really long beards and they never cut their beards, which is why like when you watch movies from the Nazi era and you would see them publicly humiliating people on the streets, that's one of the things they would do was they would cut the beards of Jewish men and they would cut off their sideburns because they knew what a tremendous pain this was, spiritual pain for those people. And so I thought, well, that's just another example of the cherry picking from the Bible, though, right? Because this is Leviticus, this is Old Testament. So it's like, it's that same thing, right? Man should not lie with another man. But do you cut your sideburns? Because I watch you do it with that little trimmer buzzer every single day, don't I? Right? And so it's that cherry picking that just drives me a little bit crazy. Like if you're going to own it, at least own the 613 because the 613 commandments in Judaism come from the Old Testament. So technically Christians have those too. They've just chosen their 10 favorite to follow because they're definitely cutting their beards and their sideburns.
All right. So a few pages later, I had the next note on page 33. The quote says, another thing to think about. Is this a rule from your God or yourself, the prophet of that God? So again, this is in relation to that activity that we're doing, but it relates beyond that, right? So in the religion of Islam, the Prophet Muhammad made up rules he said came from his God, Allah. In the Old Testament of the Bible, God comes to earth as a burning bush to give Moses his laws. We have many options, but interesting stories work better. And this goes back to one of the previous books that talks about the importance of interesting and creative storytelling and why so much of what we believe is because of good storytellers and the boring stories got forgotten. And again, just like a great topic for discussion, like rabbit holes galore.
Yeah. I love it.
All right, so that is the first half of this book. Next week, we will read the second half. But before we totally wrap up, we do want to just let you know, if you didn't hear our earlier episode this week, we are super excited to let everyone know that we have decided to put out some courses. So if you have been following along, or even if you just recently found us, we are going to put out some online courses. We have one that is like homeschooling 101, a no panic boot camp. So it's set up to be a 5-day kind of boot camp, and it has like just all of the nuts and bolts of how to get started. So if you are thinking about it, if you're brand new, even if you're just like a year in and doing the whole, like, I don't know if this was the right choice or not, like, do we keep doing it? Should we go back to brick and mortar school? This is a great thing for you to start. It's a great place to just kind of really figure out why you did it and what you want to do differently and what style you want to homeschool. We've got a workbook with some helpful quizzes. Like, there's just so much in it, right? This is it's a great resource, and it's going to be super affordable. So it'll be on mine. We're using like a proper service as soon as we get it all figured out. This is not we can help you homeschool. Figuring out the tech side of it's taken us a little bit more work, but it should be available probably by the time you're listening to this, if not within a few days of that. We've also got one that's for people who are homeschooling younger kiddos, so preschool and kindergarten. If you've got a kid who's 6 or younger, it's going to be a really solid resource for ways to make sure that you are focusing on developmentally appropriate, physically appropriate, emotionally appropriate education for those younger kiddos. And then if you've got a kiddo who's a little bit older, or you just like to plan, because I'm a planner for sure, we're going to have another course that is on curriculum and how to pick curriculum. It'll give you a bunch of different ideas of things to look for, things to keep in mind, things to look out for. And yeah, it'll just be, really helpful. And we're really excited. We've been putting a lot of time and effort into it. I'm dying a little. It's been a lot of hard work, but we're there. We're on the home stretch of it. And yeah, we can't wait to share it with everyone.
Yeah, it's going to be amazing. We're super excited to be able to bring it out. I mean, we've given so much information throughout the podcasts over time, but you have to cobble it all together. This is a concise course that just is kind of like these books, right? Where it's like it leads you from one point to the next point to the next point in a clear and concise way, with activities that support the learning and all kinds of stuff. So it's just a different way of kind of tackling your early homeschool journey, which is awesome.
Yeah.
So we're super excited about it.
For sure. And you will be able to find it through our website, but the easiest way to stay on top of it, these courses, and then we'll be putting out more courses in the future. There'll be one on specifically on unschooling and some other things. So if you want to stay on top of those, you should come join our Patreon. There's a totally free option. You just have a general Patreon account and then you follow us. But if you follow us and you have the free membership option, we do announcements, but I also do a monthly newsletter that has links to all the different things. And it's kind of like a roundup of the month and also some fun things that we throw in there and whatever. But it's a great way to be able to stay on top of that stuff. And then you can set it up so you get an email in your inbox. You just, file it away. And when you're ready, you can go find it and click on it. It'll make it nice and easy. So totally recommend coming over to the Patreon and doing the free account so that you get those like regular newsletters and updates.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, peeps. So that wraps us up for this week. We will be back next week with the conclusion of this book. Super exciting. And in the meantime, happy homeschooling.
Yeah, have a great one.
Or should I say happy margaritas? Because it's Amanda's margarita time now. You've made it.
That's even better. I hope you have a great day. I'm going to have a great margarita on the rocks with salt. Thank you.
Until next time. Bye.